Hi, I'm Jim Smith, the Executive Director of the Department of Aviation, and I'm here today to go over the Aviation Department's financial forecast for the next 5 years. The first slide goes over where we are today, what our 2013 budget is, and our operating revenue, which is a little over $100 million. That comes from really two sources. One is from the airlines and the fees that we charge the airlines, and another is non-airline revenue, which we collect from parking, rental car companies, and a variety of other sources. Our total requirements are a little over $86 million. And our capital improvement project spending for the year, which is on a large capital projects, additions to the airport to keep it up to date, is $28.3 million. In addition, we try and hold the full-time employee count to 351. But most of you know there are many more people than that who work at the airport. There's 3,500 people who work at the airport, but only 351 work directly for the city. This next slide shows the 5-year forecast. Operating revenue across the top. You can see that we're projecting a slight increase for the fiscal year 14, and that's primarily driven by a reduction in our parking revenue, which I'll go over a little more in a minute. Our total requirements are pretty much going up with inflation. We're not projecting any large operating requirement increases. And our net income to the capital fund, which is what we have left over, or the airport's profit at the end of the year, and what we transfer to our capital account to help pay for future capital projects, averages about $8 million a year throughout the forecast. As you can see, we're trying to hold on to our full-time employee count and keep it at 351. The next two slides get into performance measures that we use to monitor how we are performing at our airport compared with all the other airports in the United States. And both are metrics relative to our revenue performance. The first one is on airline cost per plane passenger. It allows us to compare our cost here in Austin with all the other airports in the U.S. The first bar on your right shows the 2011 average cost that airlines paid at airports. And you can see from the forecast what we're projecting over the next 5 years, what Austin's expenses will be. And you can see that we're basically mid-pack with the other airlines, which is where we want to be. Means that they pay us about roughly the same as they pay at other airports, which makes us competitive. This next slide is the second revenue source, non-airline revenue, and that's primarily made up of parking, which makes up 56% of our non-airline revenue. Rental car companies is second, and then food, beverage, and retail, and then our land use revenue. All those added up, you can see that in 2012 we were at $11.86 per plane passenger in terms of our revenue production. And that's projected to slightly decrease into next year's budget, again primarily driven because of a drop in parking revenue. And after that we project it to grow at about 5% a year. So our expense assumptions going into the 2014 budget, we're only projecting citywide mandated increases relative to costs associated with personnel and inflationary increases in our commodities. We're holding the line on the number of full-time employees. We are going to have to issue some additional debt to help fund the capital improvements at the airport, the two largest of which are we're doing an east infill project, which is about a $55 million project to expand the security checkpoints and the customs and border protection operations at the airport. So we'll be issuing $60 million in new debt in the coming year, and then in 2015 another $54 million, in 2016 almost $30 million after that. Our revenue assumptions going forward, we're projecting 2% annual passenger growth. That's consistent with FAA's forecast for the U.S. over the same period. And we're projecting about a 2.8% revenue reduction for 2014. And again, that's from the parking revenue. The parking revenue is really being driven by two things. One is we have to take half of one parking lot out of service to build a new rental car facility on the lots. That means for 2 years that will be out of service. We're losing 1,000 spaces. And at the same time, a parking competitor of ours is just constructed 2,000 more spaces. So the combination of those two things will impact our parking revenue and bring a reduction to it. Our capital highlights, you can see our spending plan for 2014 adds up to $47 million. These are necessary expenses to keep our airport up to date and have it keep up with the growth of our community. And you can see it's split over improvements that we have to make on the air side, which is taxiways, runways, those type of facilities. Landside improvements, which are to the roads around the airport and a variety of other things. Terminal improvements, and also a number of other things. Finally, in summary, we're projecting that the airport will continue to grow, roughly about 2%. We're projecting that our revenue will continue to grow along with that, roughly about 5% a year after declining shortly in 2014 over the parking expenses. Expense changes, we're anticipating holding the line. There's one qualification to that. Most of you are familiar with what's going on with the federal government these days and the sequestration. Some of those things do have the ability to impact our costs at the airport. And if they do, we'll have to take them as they come. We are anticipating there will be some changes that will add additional costs to the airport as the federal government stops performing those functions. So our average net contributions to the capital fund, or our profit at the end of each year, is going to be roughly about $8 million. And we project about $143 million in additional debt funding going forward, again, to keep the airport up to date and having its capacity grow to meet the demands of the community. And that, in conclusion, is a summary of our forecast for the next 5 years, and more specifically what's going to happen in 2014. And I appreciated the opportunity to talk with you.